I don't know if it was like a Spotify Discover thing or something that was just recommended to me through an algorithm, but it was something I discovered completely on my own. The first song I ever heard off of the album was Prelude to Falling Alice, and I thought it was so beautiful that I just had to listen to the whole thing, and I kind of fell in love with the rest of the album too.
This week's request comes from my Season 2 collaborator, Astrid Trucks. Astrid is a senior studying music technology at a private university in northern Kentucky. They're also an accomplished cellist, composer, and one of the better sight readers I've ever worked with. Plus, Astrid's my kid, in whom I'm quite well pleased. And Astrid recommended The Mad Hatter by Chick Corea. Yeah, that's my kid, all right. Look, I've heard a ton of Chick Corea. I'm a huge fan. Let's see, I know his mid-60s work as a sideman. His work with Miles in The Birth of Fusion. All of the different variations of Return to Forever, from its Latin jazz roots as a feather can be, to the heavy fusion era with Bill Connors. That guitar solo is my dad's favorite of all time. To the ornate Baroque Prague era with Al Di Meola. I know his work with the electric band and the acoustic band, the 5-piece band, and the reformed RTF with Jean-Luc Ponty and Frank Gambale. Even seen him live on multiple occasions. But for whatever reason, I seem to have a blank spot in my knowledge that covers the late 70s and early 80s. The period between Return to Forever and the Electric Band. But in all fairness, punk was happening at the same time and all manner of jazz got kinda cheese frog right about then. Still, I'm very excited to dive into an era of Chick Corea I've not explored before. Good call, kid. So I guess the time has come to hear of many things. Of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings. Now, where'd I put my pocket watch? I'll be right back.
I've really been always enamored with the story of Alice in Wonderland and through its many adaptations, which I'm sure you're aware of. Having that knowledge and listening to it with that context adds so much to it. It's a companion album, pretty much, in my eyes. It's a story of like self-discovery and like not knowing yourself. And I feel like that's always applicable. You're always learning more about yourself. Plus, I've always really loved the visuals and just the aesthetic of it. I find really enchanting. And I think the album like encapsulates that really well. It starts out with this electronic soundscape trying to paint the scene of like the woods that Alice is lost in.
There are parts of the Mad Hatter that feel like a continuation of Return to Forever. There are parts of the Mad Hatter that are a throwback to hard bop. And there are parts of the Mad Hatter that are altogether mimsy. There's even one bit that sounds like the GameCube startup noise. Also, looking at the personnel, it looks like the Mad Hatter might have been the result of a few different sessions combined. Some songs feature only keyboards, some have a rhythm section of Jamie Fount and Harvey Mason, and some have Eddie Gomez and Steve Gadd. But with Joe Farrell on woodwinds and Chick Corea's wife Gail Moran on vocals on both configurations, plus strings and brass on several tunes, and a guest spot by Herbie Hancock on one track. The timbral palette, especially in the keyboard department, is very similar to like Romantic Warrior and Music Magic, with a broad range of sounds employed: piano, Rhodes, Moog, ARP, Oberheim, that lot. The first track, The Woods, is a sound effects and layered keyboards piece with marimba, kind of a musical approximation that follows the white rabbit at the start of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Tweedledee is a call and response piece between piano and strings, with Chick Corea starting with a heavily muted single piano note, but going quite out by the end. Speaking of going out, the next song is The Trial. And this is the closest I've ever heard to Chick Corea going to leather-era Frank Zappa instrumental compositional tomfoolery. Like, it wouldn't sound out of place in between, like, say, music for guitar and low-budget orchestra and Radunzel. But the next tune is Humpty Dumpty, and this is some of the better and more adventurous hard bop I've heard in quite a while, even if the sax needs to come up just a bit in the mix, with Chick Corea, Joe Farrell, Eddie Gomez, and Steve Gadd all playing their bandersnatches off. Prelude to Falling Alice is basically a minute-long intro to Falling Alice, and in fact segues directly into the main melody. The coolest thing about the prelude is Gail Moran's vocal harmonies, high and ethereal and quite beautiful. But Falling Alice itself uses a lovely and clever descending chromatic melody over a pedal tone. In fact, it's similar in a lot of ways to After the Cosmic Rain, the Stanley Clarke tune from Hymn to the Seventh Galaxy. But now that I think about it, it's actually the same notes that Led Zeppelin uses in Dazed and Confused, just in a different key. Tweedledum is a kind of languid, melancholy piece for strings, piano, and vocalizations. It's pretty, if a bit overdramatic. Then we get to the two major suites on the album, starting with Dear Alice. This is mostly a Return to Forever style fusion jam, only using acoustic instruments, piano, upright bass, drums, and voice, with some strings and brass added on the head, beginning and end. Both Eddie Gomez and Chick Corea play impressive solos, and the dynamics are really nice. Plus some killer Steve Gadd fills over the ending vamp. And finally, the Mad Hatter Rhapsody. And it occurs to me that I should probably point out to those of you that might not know that rhapsody in this sense does not mean a feeling of great joy. In music, a rhapsody is a single piece composed of multiple parts and usually has an element of improvisation, as in Bohemian Rhapsody or Rhapsody in Blue. There's a disco-inspired groove with lots of room for many different keyboard improvisations on this one, from both Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock. But with an ending that calls back to Falling Alice. The Mad Hatter is a lot of what I love about Chick Corea as an improviser and as a composer. There are times on the album that I think he overindulges just a hair, but still very listenable and beautiful. What can I say? The guy can play. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to see if I can woodshed Humpty Dumpty. I'd really like to add that to a set list sometime soon.
I've always liked Chick Corea. I've played some Chick Corea. I've played Harry Canary. I've played Armando's Roomba. I think I've played another, but I can't remember at the moment. I really recently discovered this album. Yeah, no, I haven't been familiar with this album up until like a couple weeks ago. So you're getting into this at a similar time that I'm getting into this.
This has been an interesting week. Thanks to this weird little music show of mine, over the past 2 years, I've spent a lot of time with music that has a lot of similarities to the music on the Mad Hatter, especially the Canterbury Scene albums I looked at last season. But it's kind of weird. After spending so much time learning music that feels very much like the 70s fusion I cut my teeth on ages ago, only with a sense of humor and playfulness, well, now that I'm wading back into something from one of the OG fusion heavies, well, it seems to me like Chick Corea might be taking himself a little too seriously, maybe? But is that an aspect of the genre as a whole or just this one album? Excellent question. I honestly don't know. Now, don't get me wrong. The Mad Hatter is brilliant. This is amazing music, and I will absolutely keep listening to it for years to come. But something about the last couple of years has conditioned me to keep looking for the turn, right? The tongue-in-cheek moments. Looking for those song titles with wordplay in them. And I mean, there's a little of that here, right? The hopping rabbit sound effect that starts the album off, for example. But more often than not, the music on the Mad Hatter is more like... But end of the day, though, I say you need to hear it if you haven't heard it already. The core quartet of Chick Corea, Joe Farrell, Eddie Gomez, and Steve Gadd is just about as 70s jazz gets, I think. So my final thoughts, on a scale of 1 to 10, I give The Mad Hatter by Chick Corea 10 shillings 6 pence.
Oh, what a delightful time!
See you next week.